He was the unforgettable villain with the crooked eye, a face that said trouble, and a presence that stole every scene, Jack Elam. But behind that wild-eyed stare, there was something no one knew, until James Garner, his longtime friend and co-star, finally opened up. Were you a fan of old westerns like Maverick or Gunsmoke? Type 1 for yes or 0 for no in the comments. We'd love to know who's still riding with the classics. And now, let's explore the truth behind their relationship. To most people, Jack Elam was the crazy-eyed outlaw, always plotting something, always causing trouble. But to James Garner, he was something more. A gentleman, a genius, and one of the most misunderstood actors in Hollywood. So what did Garner finally reveal? What was the truth hiding behind Jack Elam's rough exterior? Throughout his long and distinguished career, Garner developed countless friendships across the film and television industry. But one name always lingered on the edges of public curiosity: Jack Elam. James Garner was the face of rugged charm and effortless cool, best known for his roles in Maverick, The Rockford Files, and The Great Escape. But behind the scenes, Garner carried with him a quiet reverence for a man Hollywood often misunderstood: the wild-eyed, gravel-voiced character actor Jack Elam. To the public, Elam was a walking caricature, the lazy eye, the permanent scowl, and the gunslinger always on the edge of madness. But in private conversations, Garner would often share a truth few knew. Jack Elam, he once said, was the kindest man I ever worked with, and the smartest. A weathered voice remembers. In the twilight of his life, James Garner sat in his favorite chair overlooking the rolling hills of Los Angeles, far from the dust-covered towns and wide-open plains of the westerns that made him a star. The sharp glint in his eye hadn't dulled much with age, nor had his memory. As he flipped through an old photo album filled with cast shots, behind-the-scenes snapshots, and Polaroids from desert film sets, he stopped on a single image: Jack Elam, half grinning, one eye squinting more than the other, cigarette in hand, and cowboy hat askew. Garner sighed, then smiled. "Jack," he muttered, "you were a hell of a lot more than anyone ever knew." And with that, a story began to spill out, one that few had ever heard, but one Garner had carried with him for decades: the crooked path to Hollywood. Jack Elam was never meant to be a Hollywood star, not by traditional standards. Anyway, born in 1920 in Miami, Arizona, Elam's early life was marked by hardship and tragedy. His mother died when he was just 2 years old. At age 12, while horsing around with a friend using a pencil, Jack was accidentally stabbed in the left eye, resulting in permanent damage. The injury left him with a wildly misaligned eye, a feature that would later become his screen trademark. Before the silver screen came calling, Elam worked odd jobs. He was an accountant, an auditor for Samuel Goldwyn Studios, and even a manager of a small resort in the desert. He was married, grounded, and relatively stable. But Jack had always had a spark for performance. He made his film debut in the late 1940s, and by the 1950s, directors were beginning to take notice. There was something authentic about his grizzled face, the unpredictable eye, and the sly grin that made him perfect for playing villains. And so, Jack Elam became the go-to gunslinger, gambler, and outlaw in a string of B-movies and television westerns. Garner and Elam, an unlikely kinship. James Garner, on the other hand, was Hollywood's golden boy, tall, square-jawed, and exuding effortless charm. Garner became a household name with the hit TV show Maverick, and later, film classics like The Great Escape and Murphy's Romance. Their paths crossed in the late 1950s during a casting session for an upcoming western. At the time, Elam had just come off a string of villainous roles, and Garner was solidifying his place as the charismatic leading man. Most assumed they'd be oil and water. Garner was clean-cut and media-polished. Elam was scruffy, gruff, and unpredictable. But from the moment they met, something clicked. Jack didn't care about appearances or politics. He was real. Garner later recalled. He could outact half the guys on set with a single eyebrow twitch. And when he laughed, it came from deep in his belly like he'd lived 1,000 lives. Which, I suppose, he had. They were paired together on several projects, most notably the 1969 hit Support Your Local Sheriff, and its spiritual sequel, Support Your Local Gunfighter. The chemistry was undeniable. Elam played comedic foils to Garner's smooth-talking heroes, but off-screen, The roles often reversed. Garner would often be the one listening to Elam's rambling stories or offering him support when studio politics wore him down. The truth behind the laughter. What no one saw, and what Garner would only later admit, was that Jack Elam had a depth of character and vulnerability that far transcended the persona he portrayed. He had demons, Garner said in a 1997 interview. We all did, but Jack, he buried them deeper than most. Elam struggled quietly with alcoholism in the late 50s and early 60s. Few on set knew, and even fewer cared. Westerns were a rough man's genre. Drinking was expected, but Garner saw through it. I remember once, during a night shoot, Jack just disappeared. Garner recalled. Everyone thought he went to sleep. I found him out behind a saloon set, crying. Just him and a bottle. He said, I don't belong here, Jim. They laugh at me because of this damn eye. I'll never be more than a joke. Garner, moved by the confession, made a point to always include Elam in his projects whenever he could. When Garner had the clout to influence casting, Elam's name was usually at the top of his list. I knew he could be funny, but I also knew he could break your heart if you let him. Garner wrote in the Garner Files. Off-camera moments and unspoken loyalty. They spent long days filming in dusty ghost towns, sharing stories between takes, playing poker, and debating baseball stats. Elam loved the Arizona Diamondbacks. Garner was a Dodgers fan. One day, during a break on Gunfighter, Garner pulled a practical joke. He had Elam's bunk filled with empty beer cans. Elam responded by showing up on set wearing a shirt that read, I may be blind in one eye, but I see your BS. That was Jack, always self-deprecating, always in on the joke. But when Garner's daughter, Gigi, came to set one day and expressed interest in acting, it was Elam who took her aside and gave her a heartfelt talk about the pressures of fame. This business will chew you up, kid, he told her. Don't let anyone steal your spark, not even yourself. Garner later said, Jack was like family, not the loud uncle who drinks too much, though he was that too, but the kind that would give you his last dollar. No questions asked. The sunset years and quiet legacy. Elam's later years were quieter. He transitioned into more comedic roles in the 1980s and eventually retired from acting altogether in 1995. Garner visited him occasionally in Oregon, where Elam spent his final years with his wife, Jean. He found peace, Garner said. That's all any of us really want. When Jack Elam passed away on October 20th, 2003, Garner was devastated. I lost a friend, a partner, and a piece of my own story, he said at the time. He was the real deal, flawed, funny, and unforgettable. What no one knew. As Garner aged, he began to open up more in interviews, reflecting on the legacy of the Western, his own regrets, and those who walked beside him. People thought Jack was just the funny-eyed guy who played crooks. They didn't know he was once a numbers man who cooked meals for broke actors. They didn't know he spent years writing short stories he never published. They didn't know he donated quietly to children's hospitals under a different name. Garner revealed that Elam had once anonymously funded a scholarship at a small college in Arizona for kids with disabilities. He never wanted recognition for that, said it didn't fit his tough guy image, Garner said. But I think Jack always wanted to be seen, really seen, and he was just afraid no one would ever look past the eye. Two cowboys, one truth. As Garner neared the end of his own life in 2014, friends noticed he became increasingly nostalgic. He often spoke of the old boys, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, and always, Jack. In his final interview, he was asked what he missed most about the golden age of Hollywood. Garner didn't hesitate. Jack, he said, I miss Jack Elam. Everyone thought they knew him, but only a few of us really did. And in that quiet truth, James Garner gave the world one final gift, a deeper, more human portrait of a man whose squinting eye saw more than anyone ever realized. The crooked eye and a crooked system. Jack Elam's appearance made him unforgettable. That wandering eye, the result of a childhood accident with a pencil during a fight, locked him into villain roles early in his career. But what most didn't know was that Elam had started in Hollywood not as an actor, but as an accountant. In the 1940s, Elam managed the books for some of the biggest agents and producers in town. He understood the industry's inner workings far better than most actors, a fact James Garner admired deeply. Jack could read a contract better than a lawyer, Garner said in a rare 1980s interview. You couldn't cheat the man, and God help the producer who tried. The on-set Joker with a philosopher's soul. Despite his menacing looks, Elam had a razor-sharp wit. On the set of Support Your Local Gunfighter, one of the comedic westerns, where he and Garner shared the screen, Elam kept the cast in stitches between takes. But what stood out to Garner was Jack's empathy. He always made time for the crew, Garner said. He knew the names of the camera guys, the grips, the extras. He was one of them, and he never let anyone forget that. Garner recalled one day when a young stuntman botched a fall and was berated by a director. Jack pulled the kid aside, gave him a pep talk, and then stormed back to the director and threatened to walk off the set if he ever treated crew like that again. That's Jack, Garner said. He looked like a killer, but he had the heart of a lion and the soul of a poet. The private pain. What few knew, Garner would later share quietly, was that Jack Elam had endured enormous personal pain. His first wife, Jean, passed away in 1961. The loss devastated him, but Elam never spoke of it publicly. Instead, he threw himself into work, often taking roles simply to stay busy and distracted. He masked his grief with jokes, Garner said, but some nights, after a few drinks, you'd see the sadness leak out. Elam would eventually remarry and find stability, but the early wounds never fully healed. Garner, who had his own struggles with depression and chronic pain, recognized the signs. We were both damaged in our own ways, he admitted. Maybe that's why we got along so well. A gentle goodbye. When Jack Elam passed away in 2003, the tributes from Hollywood were warm but short. Many remembered the eye, the growl, the glare. Few remembered the man. But James Garner never forgot. In the years before his own passing in 2014, Garner reportedly kept a black and white photo of him and Elam on the set of Support Your Local Gunfighter on his study wall. When asked about it in a quiet moment, he simply said, "That man made me laugh when I didn't think I could. He gave me more than most leading men ever did. I owe him more than people know." After Elam's death, Garner avoided making public comments about him as much as possible. The rumors circulated for a number of years. Why is there such a lack of sound? Did the story have a more profound meaning behind the scenes? What was it that the two celebrities did not discuss with one another? After then, James Garner finally revealed his true feelings in a touching interview that took place not long before he passed away in 2014. The weight of years of unsaid meditation was borne by his voice, which was steady. However, it was heavy with emotion. Garner claimed that the reason he did not remain silent was because he did not care. I refrained from speaking because there are times when words just cannot do credit to a man like Jack. Not only did Garner refer to Elam as a comrade, but she also referred to him as a real original. Elam was a guy whose distinctive appearance, which was formed by an eye injury he sustained as a youngster, became one of the most recognizable characteristics in Hollywood. Garner grinned and said that you would not be able to confuse Jack with anybody else, and he would not want you to do so. His slanted eye and cheeky grin gave him the appearance of a gunslinger emerging from a tall tale, but the majority of people did not give him the credit he deserved for his intelligence. Garner, the friendly, everyman hero, and Elam, the eccentric, frequently malicious character actor, had a profound regard for each other's work ethic and timing. Despite the fact that they appeared to be coming from opposite molds, Garner had the thought that Jack could read a room better than any Harvard graduate could. The ability to steal a scene without making a sound was one of his many skills, and he was also able to return it when the moment was perfect. The fact that Elam was so charitable off-screen was something that very few people were aware of. A young extra who was plainly scared and out of place battled through a take during the filming of Support Your Local Sheriff, where Garner offered a poignant anecdote about a situation that occurred during the production of the film. Elam took the child aside and calmly guided him through the situation, even providing him with coaching in character. He did this rather than dismissing the embarrassment or tossing the occasion off. According to Garner, Jack was concerned not only with his lines but also with the entire image and all of the people who were a part of it. In addition, Garner dismissed any speculations that they were having a conflict with one another, referring to such chatter as Hollywood rubbish. Despite the fact that they did not often interact with one another after hours, he acknowledged that they were like brothers in arms on set. Do you know that, despite the fact that we were of different breeds, we rode for the same brand? We both had a passion for this insane job, and the fact that we respected one another was the most important thing. It is possible that the most moving moment occurred when Garner spoke about Elam's historical legacy. However, Jack was so much more than the person with the crazy eyes, the comedic relief, and the strange outlaw that most people think of when they think of him. In addition to being a skilled craftsman, he was also a really enjoyable person to collaborate with. Despite the passage of time, people continue to remember him. He possessed a soul. The fact that he made every part count, even the smallest ones, is quite unusual. After a brief interval, Garner's eyes began to gently mist over. I ought to have said this earlier, but if he is listening at this moment, I hope he is aware of it. Never in my life did I forget that you, Jack, were one of the good ones. The hush was finally broken the moment those words were said. With dignity, affection, and a clear-eyed admiration for a fellow actor who, like Garner himself, left a lasting mark on the landscape of American film. Instead of with scandal or gossip, Garner expressed his respect for the deceased actor. And at that very instant, the connection between two Western legends, one of whom was the dependable hero and the other of whom was the memorable wildcard, was not only firmly established in memory but also in reality. Unconventional entry into acting. Garner's entry into acting was unconventional. Garner went home looking for guidance after serving in the Merchant Marines and subsequently as a soldier during the Korean War, where he received 2 Purple Hearts and was wounded twice. Paul Gregory, a friend and fellow actor, urged him to pursue acting, which he did practically by mistake. He quickly got employment in commercials and small parts because of his tall, athletic frame and innate charm, finally signing a deal with Warner Brothers. When Garner was chosen to play Brett Maverick in the popular television series Maverick in 1957, it was his breakthrough performance. He distinguished himself from other TV cowboys of the day with his depiction of the endearing, hesitant hero who played cards. Garner's innate comic timing and everyman appeal were well suited to Brett Maverick's humorous, charming, and quick-witted attitude, which contrasted with the somber and grim Western cliches. Because of the show's immediate popularity, James Garner became well known. His signature was his distinct fusion of humor, vulnerability, and quiet power. Superheroes and overtly masculine types were not his thing. Rather, he played likable characters who frequently used their cunning instead of their fists. In many respects, Garner changed the definition of what it meant to be a TV star, and Maverick became a cultural icon that lasted long after it debuted. Many TV performers of his time were unable to make the transition from television to cinema, but Garner was able to do it. He starred in a broad range of movies throughout the 1960s and 1970s, showcasing his remarkable versatility. Among these were the Americanization of Emily, a dark parody of war in which he co-starred with Julie Andrews and demonstrated his ability to combine comedy and serious issues, and The Great Escape, in which he portrayed the clever scavenger opposite Steve McQueen. Other notable roles were in Murphy's Romance, for which he was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor, and Support Your Local Sheriff, a comedy western that capitalized on his maverick identity. Garner's portrayal of a kind small-town pharmacist alongside Sally Field in Murphy's Romance was a silent hit that highlighted his continuing popularity. Garner collaborated with some of the top personalities and filmmakers in the business over his cinematic career, and he was respected for his professionalism and humility. He never sought recognition or an Oscar, but his performances were always strong, sincere, and based on reality. He has a unique talent for making every scene he was in better without ever overpowering his co-stars. In The Rockford Files, James Garner made a comeback to television in 1974, playing Jim Rockford, a private detective, which is often regarded as his best performance. The program, which was developed by Roy Huggins and Stephen J. Cannell, revolutionized the detective genre. Rockford was a man who lived in a trailer on the beach, rarely received compensation for his work, and tended to talk his way out of difficulty, in contrast to hard-boiled, tough guy PIs. He was loyal and had a strong sense of fairness, though. Garner was able to use his range to its fullest in the part. He was always relatable, funny when he had to be, and harsh when he had to be. The popularity of the sitcom was aided by the relationship between Garner and the supporting actors, particularly Noah Beery Jr. as his father, Rocky, one of the most influential detective shows ever. The Rockford Files won Garner an Emmy Award in 1977, but behind the scenes, Garner had to put up with demanding work schedules and stunts that negatively impacted his health. He frequently performed his own driving and fighting sequences, which resulted in several injuries and ultimately aided in his early 1980 departure from the program. Garner kept up a steady career in television and movies even after the Rockford Files. In the 1981 television film Bret Maverick, he played Maverick again, and in the 1994 Mel Gibson starring Maverick feature picture, he even made a brief appearance. His portrayal as the elder version of Ryan Gosling's character in the popular romance drama The Notebook and the 2000 movie Space Cowboys gave his parts a sense of gravity. Garner's portrayal of the timeless strength of love and memory in The Notebook was heartfelt and kind. Along with his talents on television, Garner gained notoriety for his moral character and nonviolent advocacy. He attended the 1963 March on Washington and was a fervent advocate for racial rights. In the competitive environment of Hollywood, he also didn't hesitate to defend himself. He notably won a lawsuit against Warner Brothers for breach of contract, which was uncommon for an actor at the time. Garner's strong moral compass and the same ideals he frequently brought to his roles were demonstrated by his willingness to stand up for what was right, even at personal expense. Enduring love. Early in his career, James Garner, the adored American actor noted for his charm, modesty, and versatility, met Lois Clark and fell in love. In 1956, they happened to cross paths during a political event, and even though their romance was brief, they had an instant and unmistakable bond. Contrary to the common wisdom that cautioned against such quick couplings, they chose to be married within 2 weeks of their first encounter. James Garner and Lois Clark exchanged vows on August 17, 1956, starting a marriage that would last for over 60 years, a rare occurrence in Hollywood, where partnerships are frequently short-lived. Later, Garner would look back on his marriage with fondness and appreciation, frequently calling Lois the love of his life and the fulcrum that kept him afloat over the tumultuous storms of personal hardship and celebrity. There were difficulties in their marriage. They first experienced disparities in temperament and viewpoint because of their disparate backgrounds. Garner from a working-class Oklahoma childhood and Clark from a more sophisticated Los Angeles environment. Nevertheless, their relationship held up well. Their mutual regard, commitment, and capacity to give each other space when necessary were largely responsible for their longevity as a partnership, according to Garner. Garner was incredibly loyal to Lois in spite of the rigors of his acting profession, which included lengthy filming schedules and prolonged time spent away from home. He continued to love her throughout their brief separations, including a 2-year trial separation in the 1970s. Eventually, they made up and resumed their lives together with even more vigor. When Garner wed Lois, he also took in her little daughter, Kim, from a previous marriage. Garner stepped into the position of father figure with elegance, tenderness, and unflinching commitment, treating Kim as his own even if she was not his biological kid. The security and affection that many children of mixed homes frequently long for, he gave her. He reportedly had a genuine affection for Kim, and their relationship only deepened over time. He made sure she always felt supported and accepted in their family home. And he once stated that being a stepfather didn't make him feel any less like a dad. A daughter named Greta Gigi Garner was born to James and Lois later in their marriage. Greta was raised surrounded by her father's history and extravagant character. Yet he remained a very active and grounded dad, despite coming from a home that placed a great importance on creativity and expression. Garner loved his daughter and frequently talked about how happy she made him. He supported her hobbies and was always there to encourage her. Whether she was going to school, considering a career in the arts, or just maturing into adulthood. Despite pursuing her own career as a writer and producer, Greta would never lose sight of her father's impact. She has frequently discussed in public the significant influence he had on her life, not only as a movie star, but also as a kind, funny, morally upright guy who set an example and never allowed his notoriety to compromise his morals. For many years, James Garner was renowned for his decency, modesty, and unwavering devotion to his profession and his coworkers. Health issue. During the 1970s, James Garner was engaged in the production of the iconic television show The Rockford Files. During this time, he suffered from knee problems that would continue to plague him throughout his whole life. It was common for Garner, who was famous for executing many of his own stunts, to subject his body, particularly his knees, to great physical stress on a regular basis. The strenuous nature of the action-packed profession, which regularly forced him to sprint, leap, and engage in scripted battle sequences, caused his joints to suffer a considerable deal. His joints suffered a great deal as a result of the job. As a direct result of Garner's unwavering commitment to behave in an honest manner, he suffered significant physical effects. According to reports, he underwent 6 or 7 knee operations during the course of the series, which is suggestive of the fact that he was under continual pressure and stress. Garner was able to endure in spite of the agony and the several procedures because he had a strong work ethic and a desire to provide good performances. The issues he was having with his knees, on the other hand, would never be totally resolved and would restrict his range of motion for decades. Finally, in the year 2000, a significant amount of time after the conclusion of the Rockford Files, Garner made the decision to have both knees replaced as a more permanent solution. This substantial treatment had a considerable influence on his ability to regulate his chronic pain and to regain some degree of physical independence in his latter years toward the end of his life. Additionally, Garner is dealing with serious cardiac problems in addition to his physical troubles. The severity of his cardiovascular illness was brought to light by the quintuple bypass heart procedure that he underwent on April 22, 1988, which effectively saved his life. In order to alleviate the strain that his heart had been under as a result of years of smoking and stress due to his job, the procedure included rerouting blood around 5 arteries that had been blocked. Garner bounced back from the challenging surgery in a very short amount of time, demonstrating a degree of resilience that even his medical professionals expressed surprise at. However, his medical team did firmly push him to make changes to his lifestyle, notably to give up smoking, which he had done ever since he was a young man. Garner started smoking at the astonishingly young age of 12, which was a product of his upbringing as well as the general social acceptance of tobacco use at that time period. In spite of the serious warnings that were given to him following his heart surgery, Garner continued to smoke for another 17 years because he found it impossible to quit. The year 2005, when he was 77 years old, was the year that he was finally able to quit smoking for good. In a subsequent perspective on this deeply ingrained addiction, his daughter Gigi Garner stated, "My dad has been a smoker ever since he was 12 years old." Her statements highlighted the amazing persistence that her father had in order to finally stop the habit, as well as the long-term health repercussions that such early exposure may have on an individual. Death. Garner's health issues persisted into the new millennium. After suffering a major stroke 2 days prior, he had emergency surgery on May 11, 2008. Fans and loved ones were extremely worried about Garner's future after the terrifying stroke that put his life in grave danger. The procedure was considered effective, though, and the medical reaction was prompt. Following the procedure, Garner's prognosis was characterized as quite optimistic, raising the possibility that he might regain a significant portion of his prior ability. However, the stroke signaled the start of a period of deteriorating health. It was evident that the tragedy had severely damaged his physical health and general energy, even if he was able to return to public life in restricted capacities later on. Garner gradually faded from the public eye in the years after the stroke as he concentrated on getting better and spending more time with his loved ones. Sadly, on July 19, 2014, James Garner's protracted battle with health problems came to an end. When emergency personnel arrived at his residence in the Brentwood district of Los Angeles on that particular day, they learned that the adored actor had died. He was 86, a heart attack caused by coronary artery disease, which he had fought for many years, was found to be the cause of death. The cumulative consequences of his long-term health issues, especially the cardiac troubles and the aftermath of his 2008 stroke, had taken a huge toll. Despite the fact that he had demonstrated extraordinary fortitude through several surgeries and medical scares, fans who had closely watched Garner's career could see that he had been in visibly poor health in the years before his death, as did those close to him. James Garner persevered as a strong and modest person in spite of these adversities. In addition to his well-known performances in movies and television shows, he is remembered for the dignity and elegance with which he handled his personal hardships. Do you think actors like Jack Elam got the credit they truly deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this look back at a forgotten Hollywood friendship, like this video, subscribe, and help us keep the legends alive.